something big in our life? What if we would shift this in this moment, in this window of time, and allow our what ifs to be something that causes us to trust Him more than ever? Well, thanks for joining us, Pastor Keith, Pastor Chris. Thanks for taking the time to do this, and always a good time to be together. And we're in the midst of March Madness. People might not know this. We do if you're not familiar with March Madness, college basketball tournament, kind of a big deal every year. And you can do brackets where you kind of try to pick, what teams will. And it's been a bracket buster kind of year, right? A lot of upsets and.
Kind of offended you bringing it up right now because my bracket's all messed up.
Yeah, but you're still doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm not in such great a shape. I don't follow it a whole lot, but I won the trophy in 19, which was the last time. So we have a trophy that I don't know what it was originally, but then somebody cut a Nerf basketball and stuck it on top of it, and it's awesome, right?
Yeah.
So it floats around the office, and I'm the current holder, but it doesn't look like it. You have to give yourself a name on there, so I gave myself the name Repeater because I was going to do it again and probably go before destruction, and I think that's kind of how this has gone. You, however, and this is just because we mentioned it last week, and I don't want to pick a wound, but the Buckeyes lost to ORU. Right, so Earl Roberts University, which we've got several Calvary people that are alumni of ORU and is a Christian institution. So we'll keep seeing how those miracles work out. Now that the Buckeyes are out, we'll see that. But you are an alumni of the University of Illinois, and we talked a little bit last week. When I did my bracket, kind of based on our friendship, I picked Illinois to win, and
I have a bracket of 1. That was my only pick, right? Illinois is going to win the whole thing.
Oh.
And they just totally got smoked.
Yeah.
Right? That's all, they just got beat bad. They got beat down. And you know what there seems to be a theme in this stuff because ORU, like having this miraculous thing, like God's intervening somehow, right? Seed faith, or I don't know what it was, but there's something that's happening there. And then Loyola's got this 101-year-old nun, right? That, prays for the team, and then things happen. Well, she prayed. Listen to her prayer. Just listen to her prayer. This is Sister Jean, 101-year-old Sister Jean. She says, she's praying now. She's praying. She says, as we play the Fighting Illini, we ask for special help to overcome this team and get a great win. How are you going to beat this team now? You've got a 101-year-old nun praying against you, right? And if I'd have known that, my bracket would have been totally different. I had no idea. So, I don't know. I just feel like Sister Jean and I need to have a chat sometime, and just talk it through.
And
mostly for my benefit.
John does. I mean, this was past weeks, but he told us to love our brothers and sisters, so to love one another. It's interesting to see. You had you're pretty amped up about your.
I don't see you get fired up too much. You were ready right there.
Yeah. This was our moment.
Right? Yeah.
I think we were number 2 in the nation going into this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Sister Jean tanks the whole thing for us. I don't know.
If you're watching, Sister Jean, you better watch your back. So, well, if you are totally upset about the NCAA tournament, it might be an idol in your life. That's what we talked about on Sunday. Six words that have great impact. The way that John ended his letter in 1 John 5:21, dear children, keep yourselves from idols. And we talked about how an idol is anything that competes with or is a substitute for God in your life. Another definition might be that an idol is a person, place, or thing that commands the best of our time and treasure at God's expense. Kind of what we talked about is anything that you make bigger than God in your life becomes an idol. And it's a big deal. Like we talked about this just a little bit in the message, but over and over again, God says to his people, to steer clear of idols. And it's right there in the 10 Commandments. The first 2 have to do with no other God, before him. And we have that. You see it in 1 Thessalonians 1:9. These were some scriptures we didn't get to on Sunday, but Paul says, they tell how you turn to God from idols to serve the living and true God. And I think I won't put a we there, I'll put an I there. I like to think that I'm much more refined or civilized, right? Because I don't live in a culture like Indiana Jones somewhere in the rainforest where there's these little metal idols, nor am I like those people in the ancient Near East who worshipped idols to bring rain. So I'm not that uncivilized. And yet, what are the idols that we put into our lives in so many different ways? And the Bible talks to us about the fact that there's some things that only God can do. Like, we can't save ourselves, and He empowers us through His Holy Spirit. But there are things that we're supposed to do for ourselves, and the stress that He puts on this verse, 1 John 5:21, where He says, "Keep yourselves from idols." That word for "keep yourself" is heavy. It's loaded in what it communicates there. And I know, Pastor Chris, you took a look in some ways into the language and the word that's actually being used there of what it means to guard ourselves, to keep ourselves from idols. So talk to us a little bit about that word, because we can read right over it, but knowing the context and other places where that word's used, it gives more power to that phrase.
Yeah, I think so too. It's because you're right. It's so easy for us to think, well, that was that culture, and we don't have to worry about that thing because we're 21st century people, right? But really, when you think about it, I think our threat for idolatry is at least as big, if not bigger, than it is for somebody that maybe has never, seen anything but an idol. So, this word is really an interesting. It's usually translated "keep" or "guard." Is kind of depends on which version of the Bible you look at. It'll be "keep" or "guard," and the word itself, like as John was writing it, the general meaning is you protect something by taking careful thought or careful measures around it. So it's like the thought behind it is that you're very intent on it, like nothing's going to slip past you, kind of a thing, and this is a word that was used a lot in just our New Testament, like probably at least more than 30 times.
Yeah.
That word or some form of it is used. So you see it in places like even when Jesus was born, Luke tells us in Luke chapter 2 that the shepherds were keeping watch over their flock by night, right? That's the same word, right? They're watching their flock to make sure nothing happens to them, right? It's diligence there. Jesus, when he was praying in John 17, he prays that prayer over all of his disciples and then us as well, right? That call to high priestly prayer in John 17. Jesus uses that same word for guarding. He says that he kept and guarded all the disciples during this time of ministry and didn't lose anyone except for Judas that was already kind of headed that way. So it's this idea that Jesus attended to that, because he didn't want to lose anyone. He also said, to some of his disciples, this is earlier in John chapter 12, he says, "Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life." Same word again. And he's saying that if you're so caught up in your life here, you end up losing your life. Which goes really well with what you were saying Sunday.
Yeah.
But if you're, relatively speaking, hate your life, he doesn't say you should hate your life, but relatively, if you hate your life, then what you do is you will keep it for eternal life. And that's that idea of guarding what's going on in your life so that you don't let it slip from you. Even the Old Testament, the Old Testament was written mostly in Hebrew, some Aramaic, and then later, a few hundred years before Jesus shows up, there were people, Greek was a big part of the language, right, getting ready for all of this, and people translated the Old Testament into Greek called the Septuagint. And when you read Proverbs 4:23...
So can I back that up for just a minute? 'Cause that's
please.
One of those words that you might hear somebody use the word Septuagint, either historically or biblically speaking. So the Old Testament scriptures are mostly Hebrew, but it got to a point where as the Jews were kind of scattered, many of the Jews were speaking Greek.
Yeah.
So there's in the same way that we have our English translations of the Old Testament, when we refer to the Septuagint, that was the Greek translation of the Old Testament? Okay.
Yeah.
And probably helpful to us because the scripture was so guarded that a lot of those translations, we can then connect Greek words that were used for the Old Testament into the way that they were used in the Greek New Testament.
Yeah.
And probably that Greek New Testament may have been something that the apostles were familiar with?
Yeah, probably
Okay,
so.
okay, interesting.
A
That's
lot of the
helpful.
quotes that you read from that Paul uses come from the Septuagint version,
okay.
Not the actual Hebrew. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, probably a little bit nerdy on my part, but it helps you to see how the word's used all this time. And so like Proverbs, for instance, Proverbs 4:23 in our Bible says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. That word guard is the same word that John uses. So it's that idea of, surrounding yourself and then being diligent to watch what's going on, so that you don't let anybody break in, right, is the thing. Now what's interesting in this particular verse in 1 John 5:21 is that word is really a command, right? It's a command. Some people call it an imperative. It's a command which says, hey, this is something we do. So to your point earlier, there's certain things that only God can do, but then there's some things he says, hey, now it's time to step up and put the skin in the game a little bit. And so this is one of those places where it's my responsibility to be about that guarding, to make sure that I don't let something slip into my life that takes over, that becomes bigger than God all of a sudden. And then it becomes a bigger problem, but it's probably later, right? One thing that happened, like when I was working in the refinery world, you have little problems come up all the time. Little things. Maybe it's a little leak here, a little strange noise over here out of a pump, those kind of things. And there's a million of those things in the refinery all the time. And you have to, you can't address everything. But there's some things when it's just like, I really don't want us to we have to shut this whole section down to get that one little thing fixed. Let's not do it right now. And those are the ones that inevitably, a month, 2 months, 6 months down the road, a bigger problem comes and the whole thing comes crashing down, and now you've got all these problems to deal with, and you lose 2 or 3 weeks of your life, over it. And I think about idolatry in the same way. Like idolatry and guarding ourselves against something is, I need to be attentive to that all the time, because if I let a little problem start, I might not pay the price today, tomorrow, next week, next month, but sooner or later, at some point, it's going to cause me to pay a big price. And then I'm not going to want to pay it. The diligence I spend now to avoid it more than pays back the pain. For instance, you might have something that come up in your life that really is starting to get bigger than God. It could be a hobby. It could be a person. It could be church. It could be anything, right? It could be money, possessions, whatever it is. It can get so big into your life that it begins to consume you, and then later down the road, your marriage breaks up, your kids blow up on you, or maybe it's just you burn out yourself and you have this emotional breakdown. And so it's really, really important for us to take the time as Christians, to take the time, take that verse seriously and guard from something coming into our life that ends up being a massive problem later that we could have avoided. And that's why I think John ends his letter with that,
Yeah. There's a lot. When I was first looking at that passage, it was like, this verse seems to come out of nowhere, because he doesn't talk about idols anywhere else, and nor does he do the whole. Paul usually, writes out the whole, tell so and so thanks, and tell so and so, they're a good brother or sister in Christ, and greet one another with a holy kiss, and gives a little. And John's just like, hey, keep yourself from idols. But the everything that's wrapped up in there that I think really had a lot to say to those readers at that time that didn't necessarily translate to us until you dig into it some. That's a powerful word. So let's get practical about this then. If we're going to do this, if we're going to guard ourselves, and it's not something that we just do passively. It's not, it's not, hey, let's set up some security cameras and, call the home security company, and then that way if the idol tries to get in, the alarm will go off. This is the opposite side of that. This literally is the shepherd out, guarding to make sure that nothing happens. If we're going to get practical, what does it look like to guard yourself from idolatry? So we want to give you 3 just kind of thoughts that might be helpful from a practical sense, as we've kind of thought about like how do idols get in the first place in our lives? And so 3 practical ones. PK, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I think the first one that we need to have is find the right people to influence your life. I think of the verse 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. And so, that's a great verse right there. Bad company corrupts good character. Mm-hmm. And if we're not careful, that bad company can do that. So, Pastor Chad, you've had this question before, and, you have to ask yourself this question: who in your life has permission to call you out? I think we have to have people in our life to call us out and be able to say, hey, you know what? You're going down the wrong road. Or, hey, can I see this thing that's in your life that might be an idol, that's going, if you don't change, it's going to take over and hurt you or hurt your family and those things. I have somebody in my life that can do that, and I encourage, find somebody in your life that can call you out. The other one is, what life group are you in that can help? Pastor Chris, we've always talked about life groups are a key to, not just connection, but that part of you just to grow in your life. And that's sometimes your life group's the one that might be somebody in there that can call you out or go through those things in your season of life. I've shared many times in my, I didn't want to go to a life group, but Martin kept saying, no, we're going to go to a life group. We're going to know. And finally I went to that life group. It was the best thing that we ever did in our life. Wow. And we experienced, life with people, but there's still people in that group from 25 years ago that say, hey, Keith, you know what? I see you're a little upset, or hey, I've seen this or whatever, but they've earned that. So that's why a life group is so key. It takes more than one individual on a basketball team to guard against an opponent. Think about that. Someone's coming down the court with a ball. We used to call in basketball, we're going to trap them. We're going to do that. And so there's a full court press that you're putting on that person to trap them. So basketball, it takes more than one person. And so in your life, it's the same thing. It takes more than one person. And then Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 12. Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And when I read that verse, I think of a cord of 3 strands. Recently, I picked up a new hobby, guys. And so
this is not an idol.
This is not an idol.
Okay,
this is not an idol.
Okay, I feel better.
Quickly become an intervention.
Yeah. But, I always was curious about the walleye run, And so I've gotten into the walleye run, and my daughter Lauren's in doing that with me, and so we're finding ourselves
the waders, the whole bit,
waders, all that. We're standing in the river, and we're standing in the river, and so you're learning things and doing that. But one of the things you learn quickly is you have to tie your knots great on your lure. If not, you're going to lose it. You're going to hit a snag in life. Out there on that lure, and you're gonna lose. There you go. There's my jig head floating down the river, and there's no walleye attached to that. So when I read that, that knot is so important. That certain knot, and in our lives, that same thing. That knot is the people that we have. That cord is the people we have. And if I'm going to hit a snag in life, if I don't have that group, that people that hold me strong together, guess what? I'm going to continue to float down the river and go in a different direction. But if I have that cord, they're easy to bring me back in. It's going to be harder to break that cord. And so, I just think, find the right people in your life to influence you.
That's really good.
I like that.
Really, really good. A second thought, if you're going to guard yourself from idolatry, would be to practice generosity. And I think that's key. One of the reasons that something becomes an idol and becomes bigger in our lives is because we hold on to it too tightly. And generosity keeps things we possess from getting possession of us, which I think is just really a key concept. That idea of when you're willing to give of yourself, whether that be your time, your energy, your hobbies. Every so often I'll run into people who They're just like, this is just mine. I'm going to hold on to it, even at the expense of their family or whatever. And that generosity is such a powerful thing. Matthew chapter 19, you get the whole story about the guy that comes to Jesus. We often call him the rich young ruler. And he had guarded the law in his life, but when Jesus was able to see what was going on in him and challenged him to give away what he had, he walks away. And it's interesting because he says he walks away sad, right? And I've often wrestled with the fact that he walks away and Jesus lets him.
Yeah.
Jesus just watches him go, and Jesus doesn't, hey, come back. We'll work this out. We'll talk this through. But Jesus knew until he wrestled with that idol, it was not it was not going to matter. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing. Even pastorally, I think there's times probably people that you've interacted with that you just know they're not going to change until they're willing to work through that change, until either their pain or their God becomes bigger than their idol. Exactly. You'll hear that if somebody's wrestling with some kind of an addiction. You can't want help for that person more than they want it. And I think one of the disciplines we can practice to make sure that our stuff doesn't become that possessive is generosity. Whether that's giving to a charity, whether that's giving to the church. I think it has to start with the biblical principles financially of tithing and of giving. That's God's way of doing that. I just read a message from somebody just the other day who was just talking about how when they began to practice tithing, what that not only broke through financially in their life, but then also spiritually in their lives. That obedience. And it allows us, when we're willing to be generous, to kind of break free from some of those very things that are the whole reason that we try to hold on to our idols. And so whether that be, if something about your time has become an idol, man, how do you become generous with that? If something about some of your abilities have become an idol, how do you become generous with that? And I think it's especially true with our finances. This image has come up multiple times in this series, but the tighter you hold on to something, the worse that it seems to be. It's not until you actually open up that you're in a posture to receive. And so really helpful. How do you guard against idolatry? Find the right people to influence your life. Practice generosity. Pastor Chris, you want to?
Yeah. Another way we can kind of work on that in our life is I like to think of it as sacrificially living the principles of the Bible. Because some of them are easier than others, So like true. I can kind of, I can read a scripture a day. That's not so bad, or I listen on the Bible on the way to work, that kind of stuff. Really doesn't cost me much. But it's the times when God kind of says, hey, why don't you stop and do this for that person? Or why don't you go out of your way, right, to do something or to say something? Those are the moments, right, where I think then it requires something of me. And I think John, this idea of sacrificial living, John, throughout this whole letter that you've been preaching on for the last few weeks, he over and over says, you've got to love people sacrificially, right? Love people you don't want to love, all that. Like the love curve we talked about last week. It's hard work. It takes effort. And the more effort it takes, the more sacrificial I am with that, the less I'm focused on me. And I think one of your points on the weekend was, we have to watch out ourselves becoming bigger than God, right? And so I think one of the ways we can avoid that is to look for ways to sacrificially kind of lay our lives down. We don't all have to be crucified for someone, but sometimes my time is a real sacrifice to spend, but yet that's the very medicine for my soul if I do that. And sometimes I guard that so tightly, to your point, I guard that so tightly that now it's my time. Yeah. Well, really, honestly, we all live and God determines our steps, right? It's His time that He's allowing me to be a steward of. So I have to be willing to just deny myself sometimes, and it's good for me to do that. And it puts me in a place of dependence. Like I have to depend upon God to allow me to have the time to do what I was about to do, or the resources, whatever that looks like. But it helps me keep God in a better perspective when I'm willing to put my agenda aside. So that's that sacrificial, sacrificial living out of principles. One way that, sometimes in our particular Christian stream of things, we don't hear a lot about Sabbath. That seems like an Old Testament concept that, we just don't talk much about. But I think it's healthy for us to think about Sabbath. Sabbath is really, meant to be more for us to be able to stop what we're doing, to give some time to God that allows us to get kind of a reset in a way. Sometimes my phone kind of loses its mind and it won't do anything right. It locks up and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes the best thing I can do is turn it off and then turn it back on later, right? And then all of a sudden it works fine. Well, we're like that. We're just like that. We need to take that time, and God's created the Sabbath for man, Jesus said, not man for the Sabbath, right? And so we are, I'm going to say, called to recognize our limitations as human beings and take that time and allow God to refresh us, restore us. The other benefit of Sabbath in that sense is it helps me to realize that the world doesn't revolve around me. The sun came up. If I take a Sabbath this weekend, let's say, and the sun comes up, I guess it wasn't that important that I did it, right? It came up on its own. And I think that's the idea of a Sabbath is like I recognize that God's really got this whole thing. He can help me be as productive in 6 days as I would be if I tried to do it 7 and burn out early. And so I think it's kind of a healthy concept. And, I brought a resource that I found to be useful. And it's this little book called Keeping the Sabbath Holy, WHOLLY, by a professor named Marva Dawn. And she does not come from our particular stream of Christianity, let's say, but she has a lot to say to it. And just talks about, kind of the benefits of it. And, I'd encourage people to read it and just kind of explore that a little bit and consider how that might be a way that you can practice guarding your heart against, an idol coming in. Maybe that idol's you,
Yeah.
So
What's the name of the book again?
It's called Keeping the Sabbath Holy by Marva Dawn.
Awesome.
And it's a real easy read, and it's challenging.
And there's that's a whole nother episode to really dig into Sabbath, but a great place to start. And the whole idea of Sabbath, like you said, is to keep centered. And so really good, really, really good. So, if you're going to guard yourself from idolatry, here's a couple of pointers. Find the right people to influence your life, practice generosity, and then practice sacrificially living out the principles that we see in the Bible. Believe that God will take some of these thoughts and drop them into your hearts. Guys, anything else before we wrap up here?
That's great.
We are coming into what oftentimes is referred to as Holy Week. So this Sunday will be Palm Sunday. Really special service. It's going to be a lot of fun, kind of a little bit, especially if you grew up in a maybe kind of a more traditional background like I did. That's going to be kind of fun for us. And then our Good Friday service will be on April the 2nd, I think is that Friday, right? I don't want to mess this up right now, but April the 2nd, Good Friday at noon, and we'll have that both in person and then online. Just that one service, but our auditoriums will be open, and so you're going to want to register for that as soon as possible. All of the registrations, Good Friday and then our Saturday and Sunday Easter services are going to go live. If you're watching this in real time, they're going to go live tomorrow morning on the 24th, on Wednesday. So you're going to want to jump in and get yourself a spot. And then our Saturday Easter services, 3, 5, and 7. Kids services available for all of those. As well, then our regular 3 service times, 8, 15, 10, and 11:45 on Sunday the 4th. Just got out of a meeting where we were wrapping up, kind of finalizing plans for the Easter services. And I'm stoked. Every year I'm excited. But I'm already ready to walk away and go, I think this is my favorite Easter service. I know Pastor Binnell and the team have some cool stuff. Our tech and communications team's just really putting in some neat work, and it's going to be cool. Yeah, and if you know somebody that maybe has not come back to church yet, I'd encourage you to invite them. We're continuing to do our best to practice the protocol, but we're also at a place now, especially with some of the changes that were made even this last week with regards to social distancing, where we've been able to expand our capacity. So if you're one of those people that maybe had tried maybe at one point to register to come to a service, but you know, the one you want to come to maybe was sold out, we've got a lot more capacity now. If you know somebody like that kind of has given up, we've got a lot more space and are excited about that. This last Sunday was the highest attendance we've had since we've come back into the building in September. We're continuing to use the registration for the time being because we do have those limited seating and different auditoriums. It helps us to be able to navigate, especially that 10 o'clock service. But yeah, it's an exciting time.
It's exciting.
So hope you'll be a part of it. God bless you. Thanks for being a part of this. We'll see you on Sunday.